All right. Now we're going to begin our next panel. This panel is Beyond the Borders on how Australian businesses can master their global payments. So let's give them a round of applause. Let's welcome them back from lunch. Give them a warm welcome. Okay, and moderating the panel today, we have Elyse Adams, partner at Allens. So Elyse, do you want to take it away?
Thank you. I will. Thank you, everybody. It's great to see you. It's a pleasure to be moderating this panel. We've got a really cool topic today, something that's increasingly important, I think, for Australian businesses trying to master global payments in a world where it's getting faster, we're more connected, and it's more demanding than ever, particularly client experience is becoming more and more demanding. I've got a wonderful panel here today that's giving diverse views from across the ecosystem, so I'm really excited to plug into that. We've got names up on there, but I might throw to each of you to just give us a little bit of an intro on yourself and your organisation and how you fit into the payments chain, if that works. James, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch. So I'm James Tearini. I'm head of Asia Pacific for Tunes. So Tunes are a financial infrastructure platform. So we enable other financial institutions to move money around the world, landing it onto an account, into a card, onto a wallet. So where we fit in this chain is if you have, and again, I think we're all partners and friends on this panel, but if you have an organisation like a Revolut, for example, who are looking to land money into a wallet in the Philippines, they might come to someone like Tunes and say, hey, do you have a connection to Gcash? Do you have a connection to Maya? Similarly, if they're looking to land money onto a UnionPay card in China. So we're very much those invisible underlying infrastructure, those rails. The marketing speak is the smart superhighway to move money around the world. So I better say that because our marketing director's here somewhere.
Excellent. Andy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andy Rigg. I'm pretty excited to be on the stage here. We speak to you at a very exciting time in our evolution. I'm from ASL, Australian Settlement Limited, and we've been around 32 years. However, 6 weeks ago, we were acquired by one of the world's leading FX and global movers of money, and so we're now part of the Banking Circle group. Interestingly, we've sort of worked with a number of international players recently on how we connect them to the real-time rails. So it's a very exciting time for moving money, I think, particularly in Australia at the moment.
All right, thanks, Andy. And Camila.
Yeah, and I'm Camila Bullock. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Emerging Payments Association Asia. And I think I might have one of the most interesting jobs in the industry because I get to work with the most innovative movers of money and as well the most forward-thinking policymakers. We convene the industry across APAC to talk about challenges, opportunities, and really advocate and find best practice to enhance the industry.
Great, and Daniel.
Hi everyone, Daniel from Revolut. My role's head of technology for expansion. So put simply, if Revolut doesn't exist in a market today, it's on a list and I'm going to help make Revolut exist there. Previously for Revolut Australia, a little bit about Revolut. Founded about 10 years ago out of the UK, where a financial services super app is the goal. We've recently hit 65 million customers globally. In Australia, we're up to about 850. So you'd probably know us if you've been on a holiday and wanted to pay for something overseas and done some currency transfers. That's our main proposition, but we also do wealth and trading and crypto and business and a number of other things, and we have partners on stage.
Great, thank you. I think when we're talking about global payments, something that's interesting for the group here is how does Australia sit in this ecosystem? Because, you know, we've talked a lot over the last day and a half on how, you know, we have a pretty sophisticated FinTech ecosystem here in Australia, but how do we actually rank in the global payments world? Maybe if I start again, sorry, James, start with you, James. From your perspective, what do you see at Tunes? How do we fit? How does Australia fit into that global landscape from a payments perspective?
Yeah, I think if you look at the market here, it plays a really actually quite outsized role in the global economy. You know, if you think about the fact it runs a trade surplus, you know, $640 billion in exports, $610 billion in imports, you know, and that trade is only growing. But you also then have the personal, the human side to that as well. There's about $40 billion every year going out in outward remittances, with a lot of that going to India, going to China, going to the Philippines, going to Vietnam. So when you put those things together, what you really see Australia as, and how we view Australia, is it's almost that bridge economy. To your point, it's a really advanced ecosystem. It's a really advanced regulatory ecosystem. And it's taken a lot of that from the West, right? And we use West as a wider term, but looking at frameworks like the e-money framework, looking at how the UK regulated FinTechs, a lot of that has come over here. But what you then have is this super interesting link to the super fast growing Asian economies. So those direct links to the Philippines, to Vietnam, which is actually a very fragmented economy. There's 40 different countries, 40 different regulators. So that bridging economy leads us to a really interesting time, I think, for Australian businesses looking to go global, as the point of the panel, because where we've built that domestic infrastructure, MPP, Pay2 becoming really ubiquitous, those expectations are starting to be aligned to international payments as well now. You've got 1 in 4 SMEs, Australian SMEs, now trading internationally. So when you bring all of that together, I think over the next decade, but again, let's take a 2-3 year view, we've got to look to see how we can make those payments internationally feel like those domestic payments, because that's where customer expectation is getting to.
Yeah, great. Camila, do you have anything to add on that from your experience?
It's probably say some of the fundamental blocks we've done well in Australia. We have a modern payments infrastructure, so that's really good. We have an open dialogue with the policymakers. We are lagging in a few spaces, for example, around digital identity and uptake on real-time payments, that we see other markets has had a faster go-to-market and innovative more on those stack. I think one thing that we don't talk so much about, that we're really good at, is transparency. So I think ACCC did a really good pressure on that with disclosures on fee and transaction times, which really took... Like, it's talking about policy on paper and policy coming alive. That put pressure on costs down, which increased the trust, which really level us up across the ecosystem. But then looking at areas we need to do more in, I think it is stable coins. I think everybody agrees on that. We do not want to fall behind on that one. So we have the pieces in the market. I think it is a thriving ecosystem with regulators that listen. So now we just have to make that come alive so we can innovate on top of it and really look at going cross-border and getting closer to our trading partners.
Okay, thank you. And Daniel, any particularly unique opportunities or challenges you think Aussie businesses have when they're looking to expand globally?
Yeah, so Revolut, there's kind of 2 answers for this. We're obviously a global player that's expanded into Australia, so we've got that lens on the sort of the recipient side. And we've seen, we're pretty happy with how that's gone. I think, more importantly for us, we're now helping other businesses expand outside of Australia. So Australian businesses looking to, accept or make payments and do that cross-border, have those cross-border capabilities without sort of some of the complexity. So our Revolut business product is for that. So essentially, I think one thing I think Revolut does pretty well is picks a problem and then solves that problem. And things like just being able to give out local account details in a market that you're not in, to not have to go through the kind of conversion process, is something that we do pretty well. And that's something that I think is starting to get a little bit more focused, because as you expand, you want to focus on the product, I guess, more than the infrastructure underneath. So we try and make that as seamless as possible.
Thank you. Something I think we've already touched on a little bit is that partnerships seem really critical in this part of the conversation, and when you're starting to move forward with your global presence, you've got quite a number of partnerships across this panel, which is neat, definitely not planned. Whether it's infrastructure, compliance, or customer experience, this sort of collaboration really seems like a critical path, and you all play different roles in that piece. Camila, the association plays a pretty important role in fostering collaboration across the ecosystem, and a couple of questions for you perhaps around why is it, do you think, that partners are so important in this cross-border space in particular, of all of the areas that we're focusing on, and then what makes a good partner?
Gosh, I could talk to length about this. This was the whole flight up here. How do I make it concise and don't say things that everybody in the room already think about? I think everybody in here knows that it's important to collaborate, or you wouldn't be at the conference. But how do we measure relationships or partnerships? Same business or life. But how do we form them, and why do we do it? To be very, very strategic about that. And at EPA, we have grown through partnerships. We've grown through partnerships with our members. Some we work very closely with, others we work closely and introduce them. But it's like, how do we measure where we should spend most time? And how we do it internally, we're looking at, does this give us further reach? Does it give us further relationships? And does this give us better reputation? And that, I think, is something that everybody can take on board. It's not just that dollar value. It is actually to consistently measure, what do I get out of those partnerships? And also, I think, in the beginning, when you have a partnership, you're really excited, you tell the world about it, but to stay on top of that, to see that it delivers, and also not to be afraid to reassess it, because when you grow, you can probably ask for other things, as well as others will ask, what is it coming towards us from this partnership? And you definitely need partners when you're going across markets. As James said, it's the complexity of regulations and customer flavors are changing every time. Get connected to the associations on the ground, because they will know reputations of the other markets. So do your testing before you go into a full-blown partnership with someone, because it is a bit tricky to end partnerships also. So we should have that in mind, like how long is this partnership going to go for, and what could it grow into? So there's many, many things when we step into this, and we shouldn't just like jump into partnerships because they are a big name, or is that big name going to give me reach, relationships, reputation, or if it's a big dollar check that you can say yes to, I think.
James, what do you see as those key ingredients with the partners, and particularly for people who are Australian businesses looking to expand into Asia? What are the key things to look out for?
Well, Camilla stole my R's, actually.
That's what great partners do.
Yeah, it's on my R.
What R do I give you?
So I was thinking of a couple of different 3 R's, but I think reach is really, really important. And I maybe just dive into that. And I think this is where ASL and Banking Circle really come into this, right? If you want to go and expand into Australia, you're going to go and work with someone who knows the domestic market intimately, who you have that trust with, who understand what it takes to land a payment. You know, if you're going to go and want to, and I've had this with clients, they go, I want to send payments to the Philippines. And I keep using this example because I think it's a really interesting market. And they go, oh, we've set up account-to-account payments. Brilliant. 85% of people use wallets. Like, so ultimately, when you're thinking about those partners, do they have that reach into those markets you're trying to get to, but also into the endpoints that people actually use? So I think that's super important. I think resilience is really important. Like, actually, do you have a partner who has great support, who you can get in touch with? Do they have great uptime? When you're sending a payment, and again, we touched on kind of the trade and the personal things, payments are pretty deeply emotional. We sort of get, I think, a bit cold to them because we all work in payments. But ultimately, someone's sending a remittance back home. You know, someone's sending a salary payment. They're sending a mortgage payment. They're paying for a shipment. You know, these things are deeply emotional. You need to know that that payment is going to land. And this one is really C, but I can add it to an R, compliance. So regulatory framework. Do they understand what it takes to work with the regulator in that market? You know, again, we've seen instances where people go into places like particularly India or China, where there's actually a lot that goes into sending a payment there, and also those regulations can change on a dime. So those 3 things are super important. You know, and one thing I will note that I didn't talk about is cost. Like, I actually think when you're choosing a partner, and I would say this because I'm a supplier to certain people, you know, cost shouldn't be your most important factor. I get that we want to drive costs down for remittances. I get that we want to drive costs down for payments. I think where you get into a lens where you choose a partner solely on, well, they've knocked 50 basis points or $1 off or $10 off, I guarantee you run into problems further down the road. So I think you look at that reach, that resilience, and that regulatory kind of insight or depth that they have would be some of the key criteria. It's what we look for in partners, right? When we're looking at people who can come and help us, to Dan's point, expand into new markets or to deliver payments onto new rails.
And Andy, with that customer experience lens, how do some of those trade-offs that you make when you're dealing with your partners land from a customer perspective? How do you manage that on the customer side? What's the key things to take away?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's interesting because I've got Revolut on the stage, and they're a partner of ours, and we went through a very extensive procurement process to convince Revolut that we were the partner of choice. I don't think we were the favourite when we set off on that race either. And so before you do anything, you've got to really want to win this business, and you've got to go 100% for it. But also I think it's really important that you understand what you're getting into, what their needs are, real needs are, because when those payment rails go live, it's when it really counts. And you've hit the nail on the head. Payments are a very emotive subject. It's a very easy topic to talk about when everything's going well. It's chaos when it's not. And so you've got to be very sure what you're getting into and how you're going to handle it. And the more I've worked in payments, the depth of understanding the flows of the money, what's going to happen, how it's going to work, and so that the understanding not just of when things are good, but when things are bad, you really need to then turn on the magic. I've almost become convinced it's an absolute core competence of businesses these days. If they're going to succeed, they need to be holding relationship management and the way you work with partners both in and out as one of your absolute key things to get right.
Excellent, thank you. Daniel, Revolut's expanded very, very quickly globally. You clearly have a lot of partners that have helped you do that along the way. What can you give us maybe a couple of examples of what your key partnerships are, and maybe if you've got one you can share where they've really helped overcome a particular challenge, like a compliance challenge or infrastructure challenge along the way?
I'm still reeling from the fact that he made me sound like I'm difficult to work with. For full transparency, Toons and ASL are partners to Revolut, and the selection process that we went on, particularly with ASL in the Australian market, Toons is more of a global provider for us and a global partner. It was extensive, and we spent a lot of time sort of working through that. And from our perspective, the things that we felt like our assessment of needs was fairly unique in some cases. That we're not an ADI yet. It's no secret that we're on the process to get our bank licenses in many countries at the same time. Because of our scale, that's incredibly difficult because an existing business, existing risks. So we're living and breathing those experiences. So, when we were going through our partner selection, things like, not to throw a buzzword, but strategic alignment was very important. And like, what's strategic alignment? It was, ability to influence, ability to properly partner in the selection of, as probably many of you have been through, going through selecting payments partners. When you're in that highly regulated environment, it's like, how comfortable are you going to be that your partner's going to be able to push where needs pushing and support where where to be strong, where to be flexible, and so things like what's the risk appetite. So there's a lot of there's quite a few great partners out there in the Australian market, but for us, when we were looking at it, it's like there's some things we want to do. How confident that we're going to be able to do those with each partner? So I think that kind of alignment. What's their risk appetite? How does that align with your product strategy? I think we typically have always respected people that say we do this really well, but we're not doing that, or we're not doing that. I think that's another thing. I'm always wary of jack of all trades in these cases, particularly when you've got a particular problem that you're trying to solve. But also calling it what it is. But partnerships, they're not for forever, but they certainly last a long time. So you want them to be built right. And when you go live and you're worried about where money's going and doing that stuff, you want to know you got the right team, and that's what we felt like we did. And then on the flip side with Tunes, they help us with a lot of the currency conversions, not all of it, but quite a bit of it. So when you're doing that at scale, like Revolut's trying to do, you're going into new markets. We're now doing this process over and over, which is, we don't exist. We need local payment rails. We need local regulatory reporting. So it's really being quite specific in what you need. What does that mean for a customer problem? Like, what is the actual tangible outcome? And then how do we feel that partner will be able to support us? And then it's, seamless and integrated, I think.
I think maybe one thing I'd add to that, which I think Revolut do very, very well, and Daniel touched on it a couple of times, is picking something and doing it really well. And actually, maybe if we take the frame of how do we help Australian businesses go global, I've spent quite a lot of time with founders and CEOs who go, we want to go global. We want to start processing international payments. We want to go to these markets. And, and Tunes is very lucky. We've spent a long time building out, 80 odd currencies, 130 different rails. And we'll send them the list often and they'll go, well, I want all of them. I'm like, well, how often is your customer doing a cash pickup in Benin? And that's like a legit conversation we have. Particularly when you're launching, if you're a domestic business and you're launching international, really understand what your customers are going to use. Really understand it, because some people think, and in all honesty, we probably as providers make it sound super easy. Hey, flick a switch, single API. How many of us have said that, right? I mean, it isn't, let's be honest, right? There's complexity in every single thing we launch. And I'll be really specific, if you're launching new rails, ultimately figure out what country, what currencies, what methods your customers are actually asking for. Because I can't count the amount of times, and I'm literally having a conversation with someone at the moment where they're like, we're getting no pickup for Ugandan shilling. And I'm like, you have no customers who want Ugandan shilling. Like, we can give you the rails, but if it's not solving a problem for your customers and picking that lane and doing it really well, then why are you doing it? Because you're adding complexity for the sake of adding complexity. Because as we say, there is something behind every single corridor you put live, every single method, every single relationship you have to manage. So again, I think actually Revolut is a really good, it's such a love-in up here, right? It's a really good example of picking something and doing it really well.
That's a great segue into customer experience, I think. And Andy, there's a bit of a stigma around cross-border payments in Australia. And is there... How do we manage Australian customer expectations in what we can deliver there that's safe, intuitive, reliable? And is there a bit of an education piece that we need to help with that little challenge?
I come at that from a very different place, actually. I think the customers are right to expect.
Yeah.
We're in a world of, everyone uses it, but the Uber example, I think the reality is it's risky. And unless it's well controlled, tight control frameworks around it, properly monitored and understood, you shouldn't do it. There's been numerous examples where it's not worked. That's not a reason not to do it, though. I think we're starting to see the real-time payment rails of Australia be connected to the world. And providing that can be done well with the right controls, the right systems, then that's the way we should be taking this. And then, obviously, we start to erode that stigma that perhaps exists. But there is, I think, a cultural fear of doing payments across border, not knowing where they've come from, and whether this is a legitimate payment or not. And we've got to be better at managing that fear with the way that we control those payments. Yeah. But don't compromise. The customer wants speed. We should be aiming for it.
Excellent. Thank you. Camila, I'm interested to hear from your experience across Asia Pacific, what are the customer expectations that we need to be hitting? And it sort of ties in a little bit around that stigma question, I think, is what is it actually that we are trying to deliver at the end of the day, and how does it differ?
I think in general that if we're looking in Asia, Southeast Asia, that they expect real-time payments because they've used it in their day-to-day lives, and now they're expecting that also when they do a P2C or B2B payment. So that's different. And then I think it's also different on customer service. I think we have a very high expectation on customer service in Australia, both in our personal life and in our business lives. And we talked a little bit, James and I, about in APAC also, they expect sound to payments. So this is more consumer payments, that it needs to be a sound when the payments go through. It hasn't happened. Yes, a ping or a swish or something. Otherwise, it hasn't happened. Specifically in India, you go in anywhere and it's ping, 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 ping. So if you don't have a sound to it, you will not be successful in those markets. It's very practical. I just want to pick up on this so that you don't get me wrong. With partnerships, I don't think they should end, but they should evolve. And I think that is really important. So the expectations, how relationships, I keep on saying, partnerships is evolving. So I think those are the biggest changes, I would say. And also customer onboarding, I think, is even higher expectation on bespeeding outside of Australia.
Anything to add, James?
One word I absolutely despise, and so I apologise to those of you that have it in your marketing material, is frictionless. Because Andy's right, customers have expectations. But we often hear this talk about frictionless payments. And in cross-border, there should be friction. We have to add a layer of friction in there. But you do have to have it with the trade-off of, well, how do you make a real-time payment that you add friction into? Like, ultimately, you want to still onboard someone super quickly, but you need to make sure you're onboarding the right person. You need to make sure that you've done your sanctions screening. You want to make a payment in real time? Great. Have you done your transaction monitoring and screening on that? I'm not going to sit here and talk about AI or stablecoin, because I think there's probably 18 other sessions going on that talk about that. But I think that friction that we introduce into the experience has to be there. I think the job of the people up here is going, well, how do we make that so we can meet those customer expectations but meet our obligations? Because we all have obligations as regulated businesses to go to our relevant regulators and to our customers and say, we're protecting your money, we're protecting your payment. We talked about it being emotive. You're not getting scammed, it's not getting lost, oh, and it landed in real time. That's actually really difficult, but I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges, but also biggest opportunities for people in this room as well. How do we leverage things like AI to reduce that friction in onboarding, to reduce that friction in KYC, in transaction monitoring, while still making sure it's still there and those obligations to customers are being met?
Excellent. And you're right, there will be many, many sessions that delve into a lot of that in a lot of detail. We are running out of time. This clock is very intimidating. But I want one last question for Daniel, if I can. If we flip that then, Daniel, and we've been talking a lot about, you know, what the customer experience is, how do you localise a customer experience across various different markets so that you are maintaining a consistent global brand and product?
Yeah, that's obviously something that Revolut is doing. I was thinking about sort of how to answer this. I think it's sort of two-pronged. For me, it's like, at the end of the day, it's how right are you about what the customer wants, is one thing. Revolut has a graph for everything. We have a line. We monitor every single line, every single thing. And, you know, there's that. And we did that obviously at the beginning with the payment stuff. But I think, you know, there's, you know, how quickly are you taking a random Reddit comment from someone or something, and how quickly does that feed into an update to your product or a feature uplift? We do that stuff really quickly as well. So I think, you know, we definitely spend time contemplating the customer needs, but we also spend a lot of time really quickly in you know, making changes based on what we're getting, either through chats or scrolling through general feedback. I think, you know, Revolut's mission at the moment is 100 million customers in 100 countries. We're in 35 odd countries at the moment. As I said before, we'll be at 65 million customers by the end of the year. So it's a significant target. And I think, you know, if someone was to say that 3 or 4 years ago with Revolut, you'd be like, you're dreamers. But, you know, we have a bit of a track record now of hitting these types of things. And as we go into these markets, like we did with ASL, it's you know, what do you need? What's your ticket to play? Payments is your ticket to play. We've been lucky. We've 3x'd our volume since January just by having a new payments integration offering what's expected. So how do you embed it? How do you get the feedback from customers? How does that feed into your machine? And then how do you sort of stay current and look at problems? Like, if, you know, is retention where it needs to be? Is daily usage where it needs to be? And then, you know, in some cases, you know, particularly in account to account, that's a cost to a business. You know, it's not like card payments, so you might get, you know, interchange. So how do you monetize that? How do you pass that on to customers as well? So I think it's multi-layered. And yeah, I think we're, you know, wait and see how we do it, I guess.
Awesome. We'll be watching with interest. Thank you. We're out of time, so thank you very much to this wonderful panel. Please join me in thanking them for their time.